Most men walk through life as shadows of what they could be. They conform, perform, obey, and obey again, until one day they wonder why they feel so hollow, so lost. They try to fill the void with careers, relationships, distractions, philosophies not their own. But they have missed the crucial step. They never asked, "Who am I?" and more importantly, "What am I not?" To find the true self is to stand in front of the mirror of your soul and not look away. It is to confront the chaos, the darkness, the irrational, and the divine within you. It is not comfort. It is not ego inflation. It is a descent into the underworld of your being, where the masks melt and the archetypes speak. It is here, beneath your persona, beyond your conditioning, that the self waits. Not the self you've been told to become, but the one you've always been. Jung teaches that the journey of individuation, the path to your true self, is the central task of life. It is not given, it must be earned. Not through success, but through confrontation. Not through applause, but through silence. If you would be whole, you must descend first into fragmentation. You must reclaim the parts of you you've exiled. The child you silenced, the rage you denied, the desires you shamed, the wounds you ignored, these are not obstacles. They are keys. They are the signs that the self is calling, and yet the modern man resists this path. He fears discomfort, he fears depth. He wants ease, certainty, praise, but the self cannot be found in shallow waters. It lives in the abyss. It speaks in dreams. It whispers in your neuroses. It appears when the ego breaks. So if you feel lost, fractured, confused, good, you are close, because only when the ego cracks can the light of the self shine through. The world does not need more perfect men. It needs more whole men. Men who are no longer fragmented by fear. Men who have integrated their darkness. Men who have died to the false self and been reborn as something real. This is not a metaphor. It is a transformation. And it begins the moment you stop running from who you are. Every man carries a shadow. This is not simply a metaphor or a poetic device. It is a psychological reality embedded in the fabric of the psyche. The shadow is everything within you that you have rejected, denied, ignored, or buried. Your fears, your shame, your impulses, your anger, your wounds. It is the part of you that you do not want the world to see. More dangerously, it is the part of you that you do not want to see. And yet, until you turn and face it, you will remain a stranger to your own self. To confront the shadow is not to indulge it. It is to recognize its presence and reclaim its power. When you avoid your shadow, you do not escape it. You merely project it. You see in others the darkness you have refused to acknowledge in yourself. You demonize what you secretly contain. You wage war with the world instead of making peace with your own soul. And in doing so, you give the shadow power over you. What you resist grows stronger. What you repress erupts elsewhere. Neurosis, addiction, rage, emptiness. These are the symptoms of a man who has become possessed by the very parts of himself he has disowned. But when you turn inward and shine the light of consciousness upon the shadow, something miraculous begins. The rejected becomes recognized. The hidden becomes integrated. You begin to retrieve pieces of your psyche that have been lost to fear and repression. This process is not comfortable. It is not easy. It is not nice. It requires a descent, a voluntary confrontation with the worst within you. The path to your true self runs directly through everything you have tried to avoid. You may find within yourself cruelty, jealousy, lust, hatred. These are human. These are yours. The question is not whether you possess them, but whether you will let them possess you unconsciously, or whether you will integrate them consciously. For example, aggression when unconscious becomes violence, but when integrated it becomes strength, assertion, power. Sexual desire when repressed becomes perversion or shame, but when acknowledged it becomes intimacy and vitality. Every part of the shadow contains energy, and that energy, when reclaimed, becomes part of your wholeness. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The work of confronting the shadow is not glamorous, but it is sacred. It is the foundation upon which all true transformation rests. Until you confront your own darkness, you will continue to be controlled by it, and if you seek to become your true self without first confronting the shadow, you will build a palace on quicksand. You must go down to go up. You must descend into the underworld of your own soul. Only there will you find the lost fragments of who you are. Only there will you begin the alchemy of turning unconscious chaos into conscious strength. The man who has seen his shadow is dangerous, not because he is violent, but because he is whole, and it is only from that place of wholeness that the true self can finally emerge. The persona is the social mask you wear, the face you present to the world to gain acceptance, approval, admiration, and protection. It is not your enemy, but it is not your essence either. It is the compromise between who you are and who the world wants you to be. From childhood, you begin to shape this mask. You learn what is rewarded and what is punished. You adapt, you perform, you repress. You become polite instead of honest, agreeable instead of real, safe instead of whole. And over time, you forget that it was a mask at all. You confuse the persona with your identity, but the truth is, the persona is a defense mechanism. It exists to make you function within society, to allow you to interact without constantly revealing the raw complexity of your inner world. Yet the danger arises when you believe you are the mask. When you over-identify with your persona, you become alienated from your deeper self. You become an actor in your own life, driven not by inner truth, but by outer expectations. And so many live this way, loved for a version of themselves that doesn't truly exist, admired for roles they secretly hate, suffocating beneath the weight of their own pretense. The modern world encourages this. It rewards image over authenticity. We live in an age of performance, where selfhood is curated, filtered, and marketed, but the deeper self, the part of you that dreams, feels, aches, and creates, cannot be accessed through performance. It requires stillness, honesty, and the courage to let the mask fall. If you want to find your true self, you must first unmask yourself. This is terrifying for many. To drop the persona is to risk rejection. It is to show the parts of yourself that may not be admired, that may not fit the mold, but the cost of hiding is far greater. When you live only through the persona, you live as a ghost. Relationships feel empty. Success feels hollow. You sense that something vital is missing, and you are right. What's missing is you. Carl Jung warned of the man who becomes nothing but his persona, who adapts so fully to the collective that he loses all sense of inner direction. This man may be praised, but he is not alive. He has silenced his inner voice in favor of external applause, and in doing so, he has exiled the very part of himself that could have led him to meaning. To begin the path of individuation, to truly find the self, you must confront the persona, not destroy it, but detach from it. See it for what it is, a tool, not an identity. Wear it consciously when needed, but never forget what lies beneath. The more aware you become of the gap between your outer image and your inner truth, the more power you gain to close it. And in that action, that collapse of performance into presence, you begin to remember who you are. Not the mask, but the man behind it. The path to discovering the true self is not linear, clean, or obvious. It is a spiral into the unknown, a confrontation with the unconscious, and a journey into depths that most people will never dare to enter. The unconscious mind is not merely a repository of forgotten memories or suppressed emotions. It is a living, breathing domain of the psyche that contains every part of you that has not yet been brought into the light of consciousness. It is here in the unseen that the roots of your identity, desires, fears, and potential lie dormant, waiting to be awakened. To find your true self, you must begin by entering the unknown within. This means paying attention to the irrational, the symbolic, the dreamlike patterns that arise in your thoughts, fantasies, and dreams. Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious because they bypass the ego's defenses and speak to you in the language of archetypes. They present images that your waking mind cannot fully comprehend but which your soul recognizes. A serpent, a cave, a shadowy figure. These are not just dream scenery, but signs pointing to unresolved parts of your psyche. Each dream is an invitation to dialogue with what you have not yet become. Most people flee from the unconscious. They are frightened by its chaos, by its challenge to their neat narratives and societal roles. But what you do not face within will control you from without. Unexplored trauma becomes repeated relationships. Ignored resentment becomes self-sabotage. Denied truths manifest as chronic dissatisfaction. Your unconscious mind does not forget. It simply waits for your courage to catch up. To engage with the unconscious is to become aware of your own complexity. It is to realize that you are not a unified being, but a battleground of conflicting forces, some of which were inherited, some shaped by experience, and some completely unknown. Jung believed that the self, your deepest truth, can only emerge when these inner oppositions are recognized and reconciled. You are both light and dark, hero and villain, creator and destroyer. The unconscious reminds you of this totality. Practices like active imagination, shadow work, and deep reflection help bring unconscious material into the light. They are the tools of psychological alchemy, turning the lead of unconscious chaos into the gold of self-knowledge. But this requires discipline. It requires solitude. It requires the willingness to feel discomfort without turning away, because the unconscious will not yield its wisdom to the shallow seeker. It demands your seriousness. The man who dares to enter his own depths, who listens to his dreams, who faces the monsters of his own mind, that man is no longer ruled by fate. He begins to shape his own becoming. He ceases to be merely a product of history, culture, or childhood. He becomes something else entirely, an individual, and that is the beginning of true freedom. That is the beginning of becoming who you are. The journey toward the true self demands a confrontation with the shadow, the hidden, repressed, and often denied parts of your personality that you do not wish to see. These aspects are not necessarily evil or malicious, though they can be. More often, they are the inconvenient truths about yourself, your envy, your aggression, your lust for power, your cowardice, your vanity. But they can also be your brilliance, your ambition, your independence. Traits you were told to hide in order to be accepted. Whatever society, your family, or your own ego deemed unacceptable was pushed down into the unconscious, into the shadow. But what is buried is never dead. It waits, it whispers, it leaks out through behavior, projections, and inner conflict. Carl Jung insisted that without confronting the shadow, no true psychological growth is possible. To know yourself, you must know what you have hidden. You must face the parts of yourself that you find uncomfortable, shameful, or unworthy. The shadow cannot be destroyed, only integrated. And integration means acknowledgement without moral panic. It means being able to say, yes, that too is me. Most people would rather remain in ignorance. They prefer the illusion of being wholly good, wholly kind, wholly moral, but this is self-deception. It is the mask of the persona masquerading as virtue, and beneath that mask the shadow festers, growing more powerful the more it is denied. It is the source of hypocrisy, projection, and inner torment. A man who refuses to acknowledge his shadow will spend his life seeing it in others, blaming, judging, and hating in others what he cannot admit in himself. But the man who dares to confront it begins to reclaim his power. He no longer fears his own aggression because he has met it and tamed it. He no longer needs to please everyone because he understands his own motives. He becomes more real, less fragile, and infinitely more capable of navigating life with depth and clarity. He becomes whole. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. It holds the key to your authenticity, creativity, and vitality. The traits you hide are often the same ones that, if integrated, could make you strong. Jung called this process the integration of the shadow, and it is one of the most demanding and transformative tasks in psychology. It requires honesty, humility, and a willingness to see yourself not as you wish to be, but as you are. But in this act of radical self-confrontation, something miraculous occurs. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You begin to live from a deeper center, one that is rooted in reality rather than illusion, and this is where the true self begins to emerge, not as a perfect being, but as an honest one. Not as someone who has vanquished the dark, but as someone who walks with it consciously. That is strength, that is maturity, and that is freedom. To find your true self, you must break free from the tyranny of external expectations. From the moment you are born, society begins to tell you who you should be. Your family projects their fears and ambitions onto you. Your culture imposes its values, customs, and roles. Your peers reward conformity and punish divergence. Over time, this web of influence tightens around your psyche until your identity becomes a performance, a collection of roles played to gain approval and avoid rejection. You become what Jung called the persona, a mask worn to navigate the social world. But the mask is not the face, and living too long behind it causes a deep spiritual exhaustion. This is why so many people feel empty despite success. They have spent their lives becoming what others needed them to be, not who they truly are. They achieve goals that were never theirs. They chase dreams inherited, not discovered. They follow the rules of a game they never chose to play. And beneath the surface, the true self suffocates, ignored, unheard, and misunderstood. To reclaim your authenticity, you must first realize this, that much of what you call yourself is simply the internalization of others' voices. Freedom begins with disobedience, not rebellion for its own sake, but a conscious refusal to let your worth be defined by others. You must stop living to be liked, admired, or validated. You must stop measuring your life by how well you fit in. This will make you uncomfortable. It will trigger guilt, fear, and confusion. But this discomfort is the labor pain of the soul trying to be born. Do not run from it, do not numb it, sit with it. Ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching? What do I love when there is no reward? What do I believe when no one is telling me what to believe? As you begin to withdraw your energy from the external world and turn inward, you'll encounter resistance. People will not like it when you stop playing the role they assigned you. They will call you selfish, arrogant, difficult. But this is not your burden to carry. The price of becoming yourself is disappointing those who prefer your illusion. If you cannot tolerate that, you will remain a prisoner of approval. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires shedding the layers of false identity built by external pressures. It is a psychological rebirth, a return to your essence. And though it may cost you comfort, status, or relationships, what you gain in return is incomparable: peace, clarity, and inner authority. You no longer need to ask who you should be. You begin to live as who you already are. This is not the path of the weak. It is not the path of the obedient. It is the path of the soul, and it demands everything you have. But it gives you back your life. Not a life of performance, but of presence. Not a life of reaction, but of intention. That is the beginning of freedom. That is the beginning of you. The sixth key to finding your true self lies in understanding that your psyche is not a single, unified whole, but a constellation of archetypes, universal psychological patterns that live within the collective unconscious. Carl Jung observed that within each of us are forces far older than our personal experiences: the hero, the wise old man, the trickster, the anima, the shadow, and many more. These are not mere symbols or metaphors, but living realities within the structure of the mind. They speak through dreams, fantasies, instincts, and projections. Most people live unaware of these inner figures, yet are constantly influenced by them, often manipulated by one, dominated by another, all without knowing. The path to the self requires that you make these archetypes conscious. Each archetype plays a role in shaping your identity and your destiny. The hero compels you to overcome, to fight, to rise. The anima or animus connects you to your inner femininity or masculinity, your emotional depths and intuitive insights. The shadow challenges you to face your darkness. The wise old man offers inner guidance. These archetypes are not inherently good or bad. They are energies, primordial forces that can both elevate and destroy, depending on how consciously you engage with them. To find your true self, you must learn to recognize which archetypes are active within you and which ones you have repressed. Perhaps you have suppressed the lover, cut yourself off from tenderness and passion in the name of control. Perhaps you are ruled by the warrior, constantly fighting, never resting, addicted to conflict. Or maybe the orphan has taken over, believing you are forever abandoned, unworthy of love. These archetypes become tyrants when they are ignored, but when brought into awareness, they become allies. You cannot be whole until you have integrated them all. Jung's idea was not to eliminate these forces, but to relate to them consciously. This is what he meant by individuation, the ongoing process of becoming who you are by integrating the many psychological elements within you. You are not one self. You are many selves striving toward unity, and that unity, the self, is not a fixed identity, but a dynamic center that holds all opposites in balance. It is not the ego, which clings to control, but a deeper intelligence that guides through symbols, dreams, and insight. The modern mind, obsessed with rationality, scoffs at these inner forces, but their denial only empowers them in the dark. They do not vanish, they rebel. They appear in neuroses, addictions, projections, and breakdowns. You cannot repress the archetypes without consequence. To live in harmony with your inner world, you must listen, you must dialogue, you must interpret your dreams, reflect on your myths, and see your life not as a straight line, but as a symbolic journey. By recognizing and integrating the archetypes within you, you become more than a mere product of your past. You become a conscious participant in your own evolution. You begin to live mythically, not lost in fantasy, but anchored in deep meaning. And through this inner synthesis, the self begins to emerge, not as an idea, but as a living experience. It is here, in this sacred integration of your psychic depths, that your true self is born. The final and perhaps most profound key to finding your true self is the encounter with the numinous, that mysterious, overwhelming, and sacred experience that breaks through the ordinary and exposes you to something far greater than the ego. Carl Jung did not believe the self was just a psychological construct or a mere ideal to strive for. He saw it as a symbol of totality, of divine wholeness. And to truly meet the self, you must move beyond the intellect, beyond conscious will, and into the realm of the soul, where intuition, myth, and mystery reign. This is not about religion in any conventional sense. It is about a direct, inward encounter with something transcendent, something that speaks to you not in words, but in symbols, synchronicities, and silence. The ego fears this encounter. It resists it with all its might. For to come face to face with the numinous self is to recognize how small, how temporary, how limited the ego truly is. And yet, it is only through this humbling confrontation that you can awaken to the deeper reality of your being. Jung described this as a kind of death and rebirth, the dissolution of the false self so that the true self can emerge. It is painful, it is terrifying, but it is also liberating. The moment you realize you are not merely your thoughts, your fears, your history. You are something far more expansive, far more ancient. You begin to shift from a life of anxiety to a life of meaning. This transformation is not accomplished through effort alone. It requires surrender, not passive resignation, but active trust. You must let go of your rigid control and allow the unconscious to speak. This often begins in dreams, where the symbols of your inner world break through, or in moments of deep crisis, when the old identity crumbles and something new demands to be born, or in states of wonder, awe, or even despair, when you suddenly feel the presence of something beyond your comprehension. These moments are invitations. They are not meant to be dismissed or pathologized. They are gateways to the self. In Jung's psychology, the self is both the goal and the guide. It is the source of your individuality and the blueprint of your wholeness. It calls you through symbols, archetypes, and inner longing. And it is this calling, subtle but relentless, that leads you through the labyrinth of your psyche. The more you align with this call, the more synchronicities appear, the more clarity you gain, and the more your life begins to feel like a meaningful journey rather than a random collection of events. But make no mistake, this path is not for the faint of heart. To seek the self is to risk everything false in you. It is to walk through your own darkness with eyes open. It is to confront your own contradictions without judgment. And in doing so, you become real, not in the eyes of others, but in the depths of your own soul. This is the great work. This is the return to the center. And in that center, beyond ego, beyond fear, beyond illusion, you find what was always there, your true self, radiant and whole.